No, hey Chris.
Hey Chuck, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. I have my youth baseball coaching debut today. Super excited about that.
Are you a little
Uh,
nervous?
yes, because I have no idea what I'm doing. Because the practice schedule has been such where I cannot attend. I'm fourth assistant to the assistant coach, I think. Uh, and the first two games we were out of town. Third game was canceled for weather, and here we are with the fourth game. So it's going to be an interesting day. Never played baseball. Went to one half week of baseball camp when I was in middle school, and that's it. So I do like to be out there, so it'll be fun.
It'll be a beautiful day. Are you going to be like a third base coach with waving your arms, sending the kid home for a play at the plate?
I might have the first aid kit. I think it's actually a coach pitch situation right now for first grade. So one of our orthopedic partners, Ryan Nunley, had the joy of being one of the coaches pitching a few weeks ago. So hopefully we're better staffed today.
There's a little pressure there. I remember those days. It's been a few, but I remember those days. There's pressure to put that pitch right over the plate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They haven't seen my stuff yet, so we'll see. Intentional or unintentional
Just
stuff.
let's be clear. Your goal is not to strike out your own kids.
You know what? I'm gonna put it over the plate. We're gonna have to make sure we check the hands for the rosin before I go in. It's gonna be a very, very tough thing. Well, I'm sure we'll have the MLB style pitch clock too, because that has certainly moved the game along, and all the parents probably want to be in and out within an hour.
The craziest thing, and I hope some of our listeners can appreciate this, the craziest thing is when you go from coach pitch, where kids actually do get hits, and then you go to kid pitch, and it becomes brutal, like brutal. Like that's when most people give up baseball because sometimes the kids can't get over the plate. If they do get over the plate, sometimes there's too much velocity, and the kids can't get a hit, and it just becomes brutal.
Too many variables, too many moving parts there.
I love it. I am starting to miss those days. Kid sports are, it can be way over the top. I think every listener will appreciate that kid sports are way out of control in every way, but they're also just they're great and they're just great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to take us too far off our intended topic. I know we're got to make sure that we end on time. But the I remember talking with Ken Yamaguchi, who was a very influential mentor to me early on. We would talk about kind of things that you want to make time for, and he talked about how he made time to be a coach for his son's baseball team, and how he would clear his schedule appropriately and everything. So that kind of was in my ear. And then my son started playing basketball recently, and so I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to coach or whatever. I never made it to any of the stuff except for like maybe one or two practices. I was there for the games, but I was like, again, like the third assistant coach on the bench or whatever. My kid really liked having me be part of the coaching staff. So he then suckered me into joining the baseball coaching staff, which has not, I've been dead weight so far. So I don't even think I've responded to as many emails as I should have. So
It's an interesting dynamic. I think if it's sort of rec sports, I think it's all positive. When your kid's young, it's all positive. But if it gets beyond rec and your kid starts getting a little older, there is that risky dynamic of how do you interact with your own kid. And I'd never coached my son in basketball or soccer. I did help to coach my daughter in basketball, which was not her first sport or her best sport, but she was good and they had a really good team, and I was sort of an assistant. And it was fun, but I had to tread carefully when those competitive juices get going in the more competitive leagues.
right, right. Well, you can't make your daughter run too many suicides.
True, or yell too loudly. I also learned, and I don't know how much Evie is getting into sports and these kind of competitive sports, but there's a very different interaction, at least in my family, between my interactions with my son and my daughters regarding sports. It's just completely different. What they want, if they care what I say, how I interact with them, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's not to delve too far into the kind of gender stereotypes kind of thing. And I think we've been pretty laissez-faire with a lot of this, but my son has really turned into kind of the boy, like a stereotypical boy. He loves playing hockey, baseball, loves going fishing, and he's egging me on for this camping trip that we're trying to plan. So he's all like pretty classic. And our daughter is kind of turned following some of the same things in terms of, she's really, really into the gymnastics and the dance and loves it. And it's been really fun to see that. She has a t-ball game this weekend too, so we'll see how that goes. But you know, she's enjoyed some of the sports stuff too. We're just gonna let them find their way. She does a lot of sports as you know, tagging along with her big brother. There's a lot of driveway hockey. So
Absolutely. And I understand you went on a brief fishing trip with your son.
yeah, that was super fun. I didn't grow up fishing. You know, even though so I have a lot of excuses. But you know, when people ask if I ski, I say no, I grew up in Florida. People ask if I fish, I say no, my dad got seasick every time we went out on the water. He always wanted to fish, but he just couldn't tolerate it. So I never grew up doing that. So we, you know, on some random trips and stuff, we've done some fishing and we, you know, during the height of the pandemic, one of our partners and a good friend of mine, Marshall Burks, we would do a lot of like lake house vacations, and he's really good with the fishing. And so kind of fun. And so then I decided, like, let's just go ahead and do a trip. Like, let's hire a guide and go out and do something because clearly I am not the guide. So it was money well spent. We got a guide to take us out in Lake Tanacomo out by Branson. Incredibly fun, perfectly paced day. He knew that we had a 7-year-old with us and he needed to make him feel like he was catching fish and even gave my son a nickname by the end of the trip because my son spent a lot of the first part of the trip just eating chips. So he went through an entire bag of Lay's, which he never gets to eat at home. So I think that was part of his enjoyment to the point where the guide gave him a nickname of Pork Chop by the end of the trip.
I love it. I don't know if I've shared one of my more embarrassing moments, but I'm not afraid to share it. And I've never really been a fisherman or really a golfer. And some of that may be my own patience and the time investment required for these things. But have I shared my Stern Fellowship fishing outing trip? I don't know if I
No,
have.
but I think you should because there are some stern fellows who are listening.
Yeah. So Dr. Stern belongs to a fishing club north of Cincinnati, and each year you'd go on an overnight to this club, and it's sort of I think it's like a stocked lazy river kind of deal, and there's a lot of acreage, and so you'd go up and play poker and have a nice dinner, and then the next day you get up and fish, and then you go home in the afternoon, and it's a stocked river and I've never fly fished before, but prior to me, I think everyone had always caught a fish. And I hit an oper, and I don't think I've fly fished since, even though I see the beauty. I mean, it's a spectacular sport, but it's clearly not mine.
Well, I think that your talents are used elsewhere. Let's just put it that way. You probably wrote a paper about some complication during fly fishing.
There are other sports I feel accomplished in, but fishing is not one of them.
Right. I feel like that would be me. Luckily, this the Lake Tanacomo where we went is stocked with trout. Uh, so, and then honestly, the fun part, one of the more fun parts for me was doing the hanging out part afterwards, and we did a cabin and cooked up some trout. It was really fun. So, yes, I'm trying to be more of a man of the outdoors, as our partner David Brogan likes to mock me for being the great indoorsman.
I love that. Of course, you worked in some cooking there, so
Yeah.
I like that. I like
So
that.
I guess we should talk about something related to hand surgery, but before we do that, we should talk about how the upper hand is sponsored by practicelink.com, the most widely used physician job search and career advancement resource.
Becoming a physician is hard. Finding the right job doesn't have to be. Join Practice Link for free today at www.practicelink.com/the upper hand. Thank you to our sponsors. We enjoy this partnership, and there's lots of interactions afterwards. And I think, Chris, you and I probably need to get together at some point and have some discussions. But thank you to Practice Link.
Yes, thank you. And unbeknownst to you, Ken and I have been having some discussions, mainly because our social circles overlap with our children being in the same grade. So we have been talking about some ideas, and I think there's some stuff that's cooking.
Love it.
I'll loop you in as necessary, Dr. Goldfarb.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So as in helping to run our department, one of the things we're very conscious of and everyone is aware of is burnout. And burnout is a real thing. I think I don't want to suggest that it's generational or anything like that, but people are not so willing to just, get beat up and medicine in 2023 is different than medicine was 30 years ago. There's a lot of external pressures. There's a lot of requirements. There's the EMR. There's timely note work. There's so many things hanging over us in an environment of pressure to produce, that burnout is real. And maybe I'll stop there and just see what you want to add about burnout, because then I'm going to talk about one of the solutions to burnout. We are going to talk about one of the solutions to burnout.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that burnout's always been there. It's just more talked about now. There's actually even fatigue about talking about burnout, and how it's been improperly handled. I think in a lot of ways of, let's talk about burnout, but go do some yoga, you'll be fine, or go do this module about burnout, and you'll be fine. It's highly individual. It hits everybody at different times. I've gone through it recently, and it's just, it's something that you always got to deal with, and it's always going to be there. It's going to change its face and its shape as you change in your stages of your life and your practice. And I think it's, we're all going to have to go to the well in terms of how to address it in different ways at different times.
Yeah, well said. Love that. Love that. So there are many tactics. We're not here really to talk about burnout. I wanted to talk about community, which honestly sounds a little corny when I say it like that. But
Man, you have going on to way too much business school. You haven't even started yet.
yeah, more to more to come. But community as a, I don't want to say a solution to burnout, but the value of community and the value of creating communities that engage and give you satisfaction. And I would like to propose, and we may not get there, but I want to come up with 7 different communities that we are involved with, and how they influence us, and not necessarily in any type of order. But let's shoot for 7 communities and why they're important for us. And I know you have one you want to talk about first, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I find it highly interesting that you announced that you're going to business school, and now you think you're Dale Carnegie with your Stephen Covey with your 7 habits of highly effective people, or your 7 ways to build community. But I can start. I have a couple. I think one of which, and we talked about this on the last episode. For me, the study group, the Planet Study Group, has been a really great community. And, for the longest time, it was kind of this idea that was in my head. And then it was becoming reality. But because of the pandemic, we never really got to get together. We would do some Zoom meetings, and we would do meetings at, ASSH or ASPN. But to see that community come together, people that have shared interests, shared perspectives, varying perspectives and philosophies, but similar amounts of openness and being able to discuss things. That's been really great. And I know you've had some experiences with the Could Registry and various study groups that you've been in. But when people have a shared mission and a shared passion, it really brings people together. It's invigorating.
Yeah, that's great. And just to remind you, this is not the first Sevens episode. We did 7 side gigs and 7 other things. I feel the need to defend myself.
I think that maybe you're just inspired by the Prince song about sevens. I don't know. I mean,
maybe we were talking about Prince last night. I agree completely with that one, and that's a more of an academic approach, which certainly, that is a descriptor which fits both of us. The Could Study Group is absolutely that for me as well. The next one I'll say is community centered around patients, and I've had a really amazing experience this week where I've had 2 patients and families that have traveled a long, long way for congenital care. A great family from Canada who we've mentioned on this podcast with reconstruction of an older diamelia or mirror hand. It was a 2-stage process. When the child was younger, we worked on his elbow, which is doing great. And he came back this week for surgery on his mirror hand, where we removed 3 fingers and did a policization. And great family. They flew in on Saturday from Canada. We saw them, Lindley Wall and I saw them on Sunday, and then operated on Tuesday. And I actually paid a house call to their hotel on Thursday. And they're doing great. But what's been really special is they've interacted with another family who has also traveled a long distance. I'll provide a little less information, but overseas. And I think they've just found some synergies. They've seen each other randomly walking in the park. They've seen each other at the hospital. And I think they feel that sense of community as well. But for me, it's awesome. It's incredible to watch this kind of unfold. And we've had a particular family with mirror hand that lives in the region who are just out there talking about it and have connected with different families across the world, which has helped build this community. And some of them have come to St. Louis for surgery for this rare condition. But that community matters to families, and I know you feel that way. You've experienced some of that with some of your brachial plexus work, but that's been a good one as our second community.
So number two is like an organically grown patient community. Is that it, I guess?
Yeah, and it doesn't happen, let's be honest, it doesn't happen all that often. But when it does, I think families find, I guess, common purpose, and it validates their decision to travel to St. Louis, let's be honest, to talk about with others.
Well, it actually segues nicely into my third one, about working with patient advocacy groups. But one of the things that we talked about with the United Brachial Plexus Network is working more with them on a mentoring peer support program. They kind of have something in place, but the people that volunteer there, it's a complete volunteer organization. The people that volunteer are just going to be inundated and overwhelmed with the number of people that may be interested. So we've talked about kind of gathering, and this is an initiative that's just starting, and I don't know if it's actually going to take off and where it's going to go, but getting each of our study sites to, select a handful of patients that would then volunteer to be mentors and coaches at the UBPN. And then if we had patients that wanted to come in saying, hey, I'm a patient of Dr. Brogan and Dr. Dees at WashU, looking for one of their patients to be partnered with, they could go through UBPN, so kind of taking us out of the patient privacy kind of aspect of it. Because before, what we would do, and I'd love to know if you've done this, is we've kind of kept an informal list of patients who have had certain conditions and had certain experiences, and I kind of informally play matchmaker. And usually we'll ask patients, like, as they're towards the tail end and they're at a good part in their recovery, saying, hey, do you mind if I have, if anybody is in a similar situation to you and would want somebody to talk to, can this person call you up? And that works too. And I'd love to know if you do that kind of informal matchmaking for your number two organically grown patient support groups. But um, you know, I just would like to formalize the process a bit more, and then honestly like take myself out of the picture, because sometimes it becomes better if they're kind of going through a different organization.
I think that's really, really smart and really good. I have found it super hard to accomplish that goal. And with our congenital kids, families absolutely want to talk to other families. And some of that's accomplished when we have our big clinics, where they see each other in the waiting room and they talk. I use their hand therapist to play matchmaker often, a little more than I do it myself. But you're right. I try to keep a little list, and occasionally I reach out to a family I've treated in the past to ask them if they'll talk to a family that's currently going through this. But it's a really important part of the process, and it's helpful all around. It's not, it's helpful to set the right expectations, and it's helpful for comfort if surgery's in the picture. Really, really important.
Is there a central organization that runs like the hand camp for you guys, or is it just all the lift is all on you guys?
The problem with congenital upper extremity anomalies is there are just so many and they're so different. So there are organizations that are out there for support, but none that kind of fit the bill exactly as the UBPN does for you.
Yeah, no, they've been a very interesting organization. We've started to partner with them for, for lack of a better term, because I don't want to do a disservice to this term, but community-based participatory research. I'm using it in a slightly different context, working with a patient advocacy group. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the community that I want our group to make a difference with, the traumatic brachial plexus injury patients. And, if any savvy patient who's looking for support online is going to run into the UBPN's Facebook posts and all that kind of stuff. So this is a group that we ultimately want to reach. So we've decided to, for our patient education projects and for things like this mentorship and getting their perspectives on our research, have asked to partner with them. And it's been, incredibly helpful to have them partner with us for various, grants that we've written, and to know that they're supporting us, and for them to know what we're up to, and to know for them to get feedback from them about, like, is this really like important? Because for example, at our recent Planet study meeting, Chris Janney from the UBPN gave some really great perspectives that got all of us talking more about pain, which to have a group of surgeons talk about something that they honestly cannot treat reliably is pretty remarkable. And we all kind of came to came to an informal consensus that we need to at least study this more and think about this more. So there's a bunch of projects coming down the pipeline, mainly because we got Chris Janney in the room and he gave some fantastic perspectives.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I would say the most prominent group in my world of congenital is called the Lucky Finn Project, and it was started by a mom with an affected child. And they're very, very good. And like you said, they're on Facebook and they're on Instagram, sharing and creating a community. And we haven't really engaged in the way that you described. It's a really, really interesting idea. Um,
So you got to get us to number 4 now if you want us to get to
oh,
7.
oh, we're getting to 7. No, we could get to 11. Number 4. As we've talked about, I write a blog about congenital, and it has created its own community. It's really super interesting. I've done this for a long time, and there's not a lot of great content out there for patients and families with these varied diagnoses. And the community that's been created is around questions and answers. And every day there is, so I have to approve everything that's posted. And so there's spam, which I get rid of. There's comments from families that just aren't helpful, so I don't always post them. But the ones that are helpful, I post and usually have a short response. And it's really super interesting to watch I write fewer blog posts, like way fewer blog posts now than I ever did. But the questions keep coming because it's a living document. And there's a sort of a community around it, which I think has been very gratifying to see.
How has the blog kind of the role of the blog changed over time? Because you've been doing it for what, 30 years now since blogs were invented. And now that you have other, no, but in all seriousness, like it's changed over the last 10 years, probably. Now that you have other forms of media and other platforms, including this and including, speaking and kind of the more traditional routes, like how's the role of the blog changed?
I think that the fact that the blog is out there has not diminished in importance, meaning I do think there are very limited resources for families to get information written for them with at least one surgeon's perspective. My engagement with the blog has changed simply based on time and energy. And so, like I said, it's more about questions and answers rather than me writing new blog posts. But I will once every couple months write a new blog post. But the importance of it is I think it's really important. The number of hits on this blog are incredible, and that's because it is an untapped or unmatched resource. So I think it's really neat.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I'm trying to think about it, people that aren't in the congenital and adolescent peds world. Are there similar, unmet or unidentified areas for education that you can, see somebody potentially running with?
Yeah, I mean, most department or private practice or any website provides some degree of medical education, and it gets trickier the more specific you are. And so, for someone who's a hand surgeon who may not have a super subspecialty niche, I think most of us provide some information. Even on our website, we have information about CMC arthritis, for example. I think it's really the community comes around conditions that are not fixable, I think, and conditions which are lifelong, conditions where, understanding the pathology and understanding solutions are not straightforward. I think those are more likely to develop as I think about this.
Interesting, interesting. I think there's going to be lots of areas of need coming up, and obviously the ways to fill those needs are going to change. I guess my only other contribution to this list, so you're going to have to carry number 6 and 7, in thinking about it, would be, we've got this nice little community of brachial plexus surgeons outside of the study group, and we meet. We call it the Tricontinental Nerve Congress or conference or whatever, and
Fancy.
it grew, exactly. It grew organically out of social media. So kind of, a different community. And I've taken a step back on social media for a number of reasons. But, I think that, we meet it's surgeons from Taiwan, from the United States, and from the UK. And it kind of grew organically. And it's really interesting. We try to meet once every 2 or 3 months. And we've been able to thread the needle in terms of those 3 kind of time zones, St. Louis, London, and Taipei. where it's morning in St. Louis, like our normal conference time, and it's lunchtime in London and it's dinner time in Taipei. And we've had some really great case discussions, completely different perspectives on how to approach things. Some similarities, but just different social and cultural perspectives, different technical approaches. That's been a really fun and fulfilling community. It actually led to a very nice dinner at the ASPN where we got everybody together recently. So that's been fulfilling.
I love that. I love it. You're missing the lowest hanging fruit of them all for our community number 6.
Oh boy, what is that?
It's one that you appreciate. You have talked to me about how meaningful this community is to you, and how when you're at meetings and people may come up and talk about this community to you, it's the Upper Hand podcast community.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. Easy for you. Easy for you to pull that in. Yeah, it has been really interesting to see the podcast change over time, even in the short amount of time that we've been doing it. I guess it's been 3 years and change now. But I'm sure, how many podcast groupies did you have come up to you at Posna?
I did. Well, it's funny. We have a little podcast swag, and I did use the podcast backpack. But thankfully it's not a flashing light in your face, inscription on the backpack, but I really did like the backpack. And I did have a couple of people comment to me, like maybe 3 or 4. It wasn't as you say, people running up and screaming and shouting and ask you to sign something. It was just nice conversation about the podcast.
I think it has been great. We do have a lovely community of listeners, and you guys have to start emailing more questions. I will tell you that. But it's been really really fun to see things grow. More people probably recognize your voice than your face at this point, Chuck. Which some of us are made for TV, others are not. But lucky for us, we've got the voices apparently.
Oh, absolutely. So we need number 7, the 7th community. Again, not to sound corny or sappy, I really think our hand surgery group is that community for us, because we sort of are there for one another and we support one another, and we each have our own directions. And we have alignment. You have a lot of alignment with David Brogan in particular. I have a lot of alignment with Lindley Wall in particular, but we are a group of 7, hopefully growing. We need help. We have too much volume, which is a really good problem. And I really like how our group interacts. The alignment between some of us is great. The larger group dynamics are great. And we're all, like I said, we're all very supportive of one another. And so at the end of the day, it's our subspecialty partners in a big organization like ours, a big academic department like ours, that make it work, because there are our department is so big, and I know others can relate to this, that there's different cultures within different divisions, and certainly practices vary, but we've been very fortunate in that we have just a really synergistic group.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And it's interesting because our group personality wise, we're all very different. And somehow that works. I would not have predicted that this mix of people, if you were to pick people out of a lineup, this would have been the group where it works, but it works because we're all kind of, like you said, we have our individual academic and clinical areas of pursuit, but personality wise, we're all different. But we all tend to respect each other highly, and get along really well in conference, which I think leads to some really fun and interesting discussions when we do get together entirely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have discussed 7 as we close this episode down. There are so many more that we have missed. And I hope our listeners will chime in. We didn't talk about the Hand Society community, for example. We are talking about work communities, but there are many more. And I think this was kind of fun.
Right. And we could have talked about our, fellowship alumni community. I mean, that's number 9. I mean, so we're just getting closer to number 10. It's gonna be like the Chuck Goldfarb, Dave Letterman top 10. Oh, I don't think people know the Dave Letterman
David
top
who?
10. Right. Exactly. Exactly. He's that guy who's got a Netflix show. Anyway,
Yes.
but have a wonderful day. And thank you for sharing this with me, your thoughts on community.
Good luck, coach. Have a good game today.
Thanks.